Welcome back to the AI Daily Brief. Today we are talking about not AI in the context of some new model or even in the context of some new regulation. Instead, we are talking about AI and more broadly automation in society and the sort of social and economic upheaval that we can expect as a part of the transition to a different type of world. At the time of recording, the International Longshoreman Association is set to go on strike with the potential for significant disruption to the US economy. Before we get into the specifics and how it relates to artificial intelligence, let's listen to Harold Daggett, the chief negotiator for the Longshoremen, discussing what the impact of this could be.
They died out there with the virus. We all got sick with the virus. We kept them going. From Canada to Maine to Texas, Great Lakes, Puerto Rico, now the Bahamas, everybody went to work during COVID. Nobody stayed home. Well, I want to be compensated for that. I'm not asking for the world. They know what I want. They know what I want. And if they don't, well, then I have to go into the street and we have to fight for what we rightfully deserve. These people today don't know what a strike is.
Right.
When my men hit the streets from Maine to Texas, every single port will lock down. You know what's going to happen? I'll tell you. First week, be all over the news every night, boom, boom. Second week, guys who sell cars can't sell cars because the cars ain't coming in off the ships. They get laid off. Third week, malls start closing down. They can't get the goods from China. They can't sell clothes. They can't do this. Everything in the United States comes on a ship. They go out of business. Construction workers get laid off because the materials aren't coming in. The steel's not coming in. The lumber's not coming in. They lose their job. Everybody's hating the longshoremen now because now they realize how important our jobs are.
Now, Harold goes on to discuss what would happen if President Biden did impose the Taft-Hartley Act, requiring longshoremen to go back to work for 90 days, and basically said they would show up at their minimum viable capacity and there would still be huge disruptions. Basically, Harold is saying, there's an unbelievable amount of disruption here. You have to come to the table and negotiate. So let's get into some of the details of this thing. First of all, the strike is set to impact 36 East Coast and Gulf ports, stretching from Maine to Houston. The ports include Baltimore, Boston, Charleston, South Carolina, Jacksonville, Miami, and many more. The ILA is looking for a wage increase as part of a new contract with the United States Maritime Alliance, which is the organization that represents the shipping companies that employ the workers. We don't necessarily have a ton of details, although the Wall Street Journal cited one unnamed source who said that the union sought a 77% increase. In terms of recent precedent, this is obviously East Coast dock workers, but the West Coast dock workers engaged in contract negotiations for more than a year before reaching an agreement last September 2023, which raised the pay of union members by 32% or $4.62 an hour. Now, the estimates of how disruptive this can be vary wildly, but all tell the same story of incredible disruption. Anderson Economic Group estimates $2.1 billion a week. The Conference Board estimates $3.7 billion a week. Oxford Economics says up to $7.5 billion a week. And some JP Morgan estimates put the potential of disruption at up to $5 billion per day. Already, ship diversions are up over 400% just based on the fear of the strike. 73% of agricultural imports come through these ports, which also handle 14% of agricultural exports. The ports also handle around 68% of all containerized exports, including food, raw materials, or electronics, and 56% of all containerized imports. Now, it's a little bit beyond the scope of this particular show to get into all of the details of the strike. The USMX has said that for months it's reached out to the ILA to negotiate a new contract, with the ILA not agreeing to a schedule, while the ILA accuses the USMX of blocking the path forward on a new contract without specifying how. Where this starts to intersect with our particular part of the story is that outside of wages, one of the key demands is a total ban on automation. Now, like I said, this is bigger than just generative AI that we talk to, but is clearly part of the same overall story. Chief Union Negotiator Harold Daggett again said, "We do not believe that robotics should take over a human being's job, especially a human being that's historically performed that job." And so in this, the story clearly is tapping into a major fear that we've seen around AI, which is that huge segments of the population will see their jobs disappear or dramatically change. Now, interestingly, When it comes to generative AI, one of the things that makes it fascinating from a historical perspective is that it's a shift that is happening to not blue-collar jobs first, but to white-collar jobs. One of the big groups that is worried currently is, for example, software developers who are seeing what they do automated in a way that didn't seem possible just a few years ago. At the same time, AI is clearly converging with robotics in a way that could impact industries like these jobs on the docks. And for evidence of that, all we have to do is look at China. Jason Smith tweeted this video of a Chinese port where ships are unloaded remotely with 5G, and then AI vehicles are automatically driven to the containers to trucks and load them without human assistance. Of course, this leads to a port being operated more efficiently with a reduced workforce, which is exactly what the longshoremen in the United States fear. As you might imagine, then, the strike has triggered a wave of discussion throughout the tech sector. And a lot of the commentary, if sympathetic to the challenge of disruption, also recognizes that there is a sort of inexorable progress here that is going to be impossible for the longshoremen to fight against forever. Star Harabakti writes, "The port union is demanding total ban on automation at 36 U.S. ports." He quotes again Harold, who we just quoted before, saying, "We do not believe that robotics should take over a human being's job, especially a human being that's historically performed that job." Star writes, "By this logic, we would all still be farmers." He continues, "At this point, the port union should just call for banning the very idea of using containers. Let's just have humans carry everything one by hands. That will massively boost employment. We used to do that, after all, not too long ago before we invented containers." Now, obviously, Saar is being tongue-in-cheek, but interestingly enough, that was sort of part of what happened in the 1970s during the move to containerization. The Longshoreman Union back then walked off the job for 130 days in 1971, in part due to disagreements on rules governing what was then the new technology, which was containers. An essay from the University of Washington reads, "In the years leading up to the 1971 strike, the ILWU had been suffering substantial losses in its marketplace bargaining power. This was a direct result of the introduction of technology, specifically containerization, and the weak economy of the early 1970s. During most of the union's history, longshore work was break bulk cargo or goods shipped by boxes, pallets, or other individual units instead of packaging them all together in containers. For longshoremen, shipping this kind of cargo required a large number of workers willing to perform a dangerous job. For employers, it was costly, labor-intensive, and slow. Technology was introduced to automate and mechanize longshore work, the adoption of which the ILWU initially opposed, fearing job loss." Point being, this has happened before. This conversation, in fact, has happened before. Investor Bill Gurley quote tweeted that same sentiment and said, "If this is true, the federal government should intervene. Outlawing the effective use of technology will unquestionably doom our nation. We will become globally uncompetitive." Kit Eaton from Inc. magazine writes about both sides of this. "When a container ship arrives at a dock, every one of those multi-ton shipping containers would be shackled to a crane's cable, lifted off the ship, moved ashore, stacked, organized, and moved around by trucks and hoists, each with a human at the controls. This is dangerous, heavy-duty work, and in many cases it requires an expert driver. Forklifts and cranes are complicated machines, and in the case of cranes, it's often necessary to understand the physics of which type of load is being moved by the cable in order to safely lift it. The danger present in this industry is typified by dozens of articles each year documenting crane or container-related accidents at ports around the world. But herein lies the problem. Accidents at ports risk not only physically harming people, but mean potential economic hits through damaged cargo or expensive dockside machinery or shipboard equipment. Apart from accidents, mislabeling or misdirecting cargo at a port could also hit businesses' revenue. Replacing failable human workers could thus save port operators a lot of money." Now, there is some similarity here with the issues that were discussed in the 2023 SAG-AFTRA strikes. Those strikes were also in part about giving current workers rights in the context of an AI-powered future. Of course, the difference here is that this strike is on an entirely different scale of impact, given the potential disruption to supply chains such as those for food. One of the things that I've frequently talked about here is that I anticipate that the rise of AI will bring with it a commensurate rise and return of labor unions. To the extent that you're looking for a bright side in all of this, one of the things that I believe will slow down how fast AI enters the world is this human inertia. And while that might be painful along the way, involving big disagreements and big fights, the hopeful side of it is the space that it will create for us to have broader society-level conversations around what the social contract looks like in a world where AI and robots can do a lot of the jobs of today. I am firmly in the camp that the net impact of AI is going to be radically more creation, production, basically radically more of everything. But I'm also in the camp that on the path to that, there are going to be some painful transitions that we need to manage. With the Longshoreman strike, we are living inside another example of that. And for that reason alone, it is worth your attention. I'll bring you updates as they come, but for now, that is going to do it for today's AI Daily Brief. Appreciate you listening or watching as always, and until next time, peace